Welcome to Nutrition Talks. Our topic today will be alternative sources for omega-3s. My name is Kelly Patterson. I am a registered dietitian and the clinical nutrition educator here at OmegaQuant. So we will go ahead and get started. Just quick conflicts of interest. I am a contractor with Omega Client Analytics, and we do own supplement brand Parasol Nutrition. So to get started, we're going to start with kind of some high-level information. Just go over quickly what is the omega-3 index, which is the test that we offer here at OmegaQuant. Many of you are probably already familiar with that. And then we'll go ahead and talk about how some alternative sources of omega-3s may impact that measure of the omega-3 index. So to start, what is the omega-3 index? The omega-3 index is a measure of the amount of EPA and DHA in red blood cell membranes expressed as a percentage of total fatty acids. So this is our sort of flagship kind of cornerstone test here at OmegaQuant. It's our most important test, the test we are most known for, and it is a marker of omega-3 status in the red blood cell membrane. So in this quick example here, there would be 64 fatty acids in this model membrane, 4 of which are EPA and DHA, and in this example, that would be an omega-3 index of 6.25%. In reality, there are thousands and thousands of fatty acids in a red blood cell membrane, and of those thousands and thousands, some are EPA and DHA, and that math is still the same. So this is the test that we kind of look at all omega-3s through the lens of, and how well they may affect this test or not. And the reason for that is because the omega-3 index is tied to a lot of decreased risk for kind of a variety of disorders. Studies show that people with higher versus lower omega-3 index numbers are at decreased risk for heart disease, but they have better cardiorespiratory fitness. They're decreased risk for losing cognitive function from several different types of cognitive decline, lower risk for depression, anxiety, lower risk for age-related macular degeneration, and kind of a host of all other disorders. But really, the big one that has been related is longer life. There are several high-quality meta-analyses showing that longevity is increased with higher omega-3 index versus lower omega-3 index. And so kind of we put this all together and say the omega-3 index is obviously a very important test for kind of indicating omega-3 status, because it's related to all of these conditions and reducing the risk for these types of conditions. So how do we improve our omega-3 index? And it's really fairly simple. The omega-3 index measures EPA and DHA, and we want to increase our omega-3 index by consuming EPA and DHA primarily. Those are going to be the two things that we really want to eat in order to increase our omega-3 index. So kind of a list of products here, options. When it comes to omega-3 products, EPA DHA combination is really going to be the most effective in raising the omega-3 index, because it does take into account both EPA and DHA. Some omega-3 products, depending on their origin, may have EPA only or DHA only, although it's pretty rare to find something that is just only DHA. It's typically a combination of EPA and DHA. There are more products that would be EPA only. And all three of those, EPA combination, EPA DHA combination, EPA only, and DHA only, will affect the omega-3 index. The most effective is going to be that combination product, because you're attacking both parts of the omega-3 index. Other omega-3s do exist, however. One in particular is ALA, which is alpha-linolenic acid. And unfortunately, ALA is not particularly effective in increasing the omega-3 index. We'll talk about that in the next slide, but it's not particularly effective, although it can increase the omega-3 index. It's just very, very small, and you have to consume lots of it for that in order that to happen. Omega-6s do not impact the omega-3 index. Again, all the omega-3 index measures is EPA and DHA, so omega-6s will not. Omega-9s, same story. And then combination oils, you might see these omega-3, 6, 9 products. If there's a small amount of EPA and DHA in these, they may budge the omega-3 index up a little bit, but typically speaking, you're not going to see high amounts of omega-3, high enough amounts of omega-3s in these to really affect the omega-3 index at all. Typically, sometimes they may have adequate amounts of EPA and DHA. So if we look here on the right-hand side, we've got a supplement facts label. All supplements, at least in the United States, have to have these supplement facts labels. And so how do you tell if your supplement has EPA and DHA in it? You'll see here that under kind of the second half, bottom half there, it says listed omega-3s. And then this particular product lists out EPA, DHA, and then it says the weight and then volume. The weight there, which is the dose, is really what we're concerned with. And as you can see, it says other omega-3s. That's probably ALA in there. And that's why we don't typically concern ourselves with that number. So if you've got a product, let's say it's a krill oil or a cod liver oil, and you're really wondering, well, how much EPA and DHA does this have in it? Turn it over, take a look at the supplement facts label, and add those two numbers, EPA and DHA, together, and that will give you the total dose that you are getting. Okay, so that's what we're looking for. There is the EPA and DHA. And it should be listed out on the label separately, although sometimes they'll just put omega-3s, and that's a red flag for products if they don't list out specifically which fatty acids are in the product. All right, so I mentioned ALA, which is alpha-linolenic acid, and alpha-linolenic acid is another essential fatty acid. It is an omega-3. And there is some research showing reduced risk for things like cardiovascular disease, high blood pressure, and inflammation. But it does not, provide the same protection as EPA and DHA. This is a quote from a paper from the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. It appears that ALA confers modest protection against CVD, although the strength of the evidence is not nearly the same for that as marine fatty acids referring to EPA and DHA. There is an increase in the number of studies in the past decade that support this protective association. So ALA is not bad for you. That is one thing I definitely do not want to come across as saying that ALA is not bad or we shouldn't take in ALA. There are a ton of nutritious foods that contain ALA. ALA has lots of benefits. And it does seem that there is reduced risk of arrhythmias with high ALA diets. But ALA does not increase that omega-3 index, which is pretty strongly associated with those disease risk reductions, nearly as much as EPA and DHA. Some ALA is able to be converted to EPA and DHA, and it depends on a lot of kind of situations, but the rate of conversion is usually somewhere between 0 and 8% of the ALA actually being converted into EPA and DHA. It's higher, closer to that 6 to 8% range for EPA, and closer to that 0% for DHA. It's really hard to convert ALA to DHA, and unless there are very specific conditions met. So it's not as common, or it's not as easy to do. So the bottom line here is that we cannot rely on ALA to get adequate EPA and DHA. And the health effects of high EPA and DHA are a much stronger correlation with disease risk reductions versus ALA. So again, I don't want to say that we shouldn't eat ALA. A lot of foods that have ALA are incredibly healthy, nutritious, nutritionally dense, provide a ton of other benefits, and you should eat them. We'll talk about a few, but just knowing that it does not confer the same level of benefit that EPA and DHA do. And it does not typically increase the omega-3 index by any appreciable amount. Going back to our EPA and DHA products. That supplement facts label I showed, looking at the dose. Dose is by far the most important factor in fish oil selection or any omega-3 selection. So that's not just fish oil, but any of the products I'm going to talk about. Omega-3 levels increase pretty much directly in a direct dose response, i.e. the more you take, the higher your levels will be. And supplements and food sources do count towards that total dose, but for most individuals, supplements make up a lot of their intakes. I really wish we could all, eat fish 4 times, 5 times a week, high omega-3 fish like salmon and mackerel and herring and, sardines. But for a lot of people, especially here in the US, that is just not very feasible. So supplementation is kind of the thing we look to replace and supplement our diet with those omega-3s. So we're going to go ahead and talk about alternatives to your typical fish oil products. Here, I just want to, before I get onto that, when it comes to dose is very individual. We always get the question of, well, how much should I take? And that really depends on you. And that wraps all the way back around to testing your levels. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. So we need to make sure we're testing our omega-3 index levels and then dosing ourselves accordingly. If you've got a higher omega-3 index level, you don't need to be taking the dose that someone who may have an omega-3 index level of, say, 4%. The goal range for the omega-3 index is somewhere between 8 and 12%. And so we want to make sure we're getting in there. Someone who's at 7% and only has a little way to go, going to be a very different story than someone who has 4%. We do have a dosing calculator available on our website. That is the link to the dosing calculator. So you can go on, if you've done a test or if you plan to do one in the future, you can enter your current omega-3 index level and it will give you a kind of starting dosage to get you up to that 8%. A lot of things affect dosage besides current intake. So age, older adults are going to typically need more. That's because of illnesses, inflammation, things like that. Health status, again, illnesses, inflammation. If you've got like an autoimmune disease or something where you have a constant inflammatory condition, you may need more than someone who doesn't. High amounts of activity, see this a lot with like athletes. They may need higher amounts of omega-3 than someone, they just have a higher utilization rate than someone who has lower amounts. Heavier individuals may need more as well too. If you have a lot of fat tissue, then you may need more as well. And then the current O3 index status. So if you are lower, again, you're going to need more. That's why measuring is so important. So you may say, okay, I took the recommended dose, but if you're someone who is an athlete, you're training for an Ironman, for instance, you just may need more than that recommended dose because you're doing a lot of highly kind of inflammatory activity. So this is the dosage calculator is kind of a starting point for most people. So another important factor with taking any omega-3 supplement is taking it with food. Taking omega-3s of any source with a meal that contains fat increases absorption. And the time of day isn't really as important, but it is really important to take it with food. And the type of fat in food does not matter. So if it's avocado toast is fine. If it's peanut butter, that's okay. If it's meat fat, that's okay. Any meal that has fat in it. So if you want to take your supplement first thing in the morning, or if you want to take it at night with dinner or a snack, that's all fine. The timing is not particularly important. There's some studies that for some situations, it may have some importance, but for the vast majority of people, the type or the timing doesn't really matter, but having fat and taking your supplement consistently is very, very important. So delivery mechanisms is another consideration with omega-3 supplements. There's kind of 4 general buckets of types of ways we can get our supplements. There are liquid supplements. Typically we see these with like fish oil or cod liver oil. It's an actual bottle of liquid oil. These tend to be the highest concentrated dose and most cost effective because per dose they have the highest amount, so you can take less doses. But some people have a bit of a hard time with these because they taste like fish oil. And so for some people, they just have a hard time with this. If they don't have anything they feel comfortable mixing it in, and they just can't get themselves to take a liquid fish oil, which can be kind of a big ask for some folks. Liquids may not be the best option for them, but for a lot of people, liquids are great. Capsules are probably the most common form. Think of the fish oil, capsules. That's probably the thing most people think of when they think of taking a fish oil. It's the easiest to find, and it's pretty easy to adjust the dose. You take 3 instead of 2 if you need a little more, or 3 instead of 4 if you need a little less, depending. And the cons for capsules are you may need upwards of 4 or more pills a day to meet dose requirements, depending on the product. Typically, lower quality products are just not going to have the dosage that higher quality products will. So you may need to take 6 or 8 of those pills of a lower quality product or a lower dosage product in order to get what you need. And that's a lot of pills. A lot of people don't like taking that. Gummies. So these are, I'd say new-ish to the market. The pros, they're easy to eat. They usually taste pretty good, but the problem is they tend to be very, very low dose. You just can't get that much fish oil or that much oil, no matter the origin, into a gummy. And still have it be a gummy. So they tend to be very, very low dosage. And then ready to drink beverages. There are some products out there that they call themselves either a supplement or a food, and they have omega-3s added to them. So similar to like fortified products, but not quite the same. A lot of these taste pretty good. They come with other nutrients, but again, they typically tend to be pretty low dosage versus something like a liquid or a capsule. So the most common sources for fish oil, most of the time where people are getting their fish oil from, are either high omega-3 fish oil supplements, or cod liver supplements. Those are like kind of your top 3 that people get them from. But what happens if you can't consume fish, or don't choose not to consume fish for dietary reasons? Then we have to go look at alternative sources of omega-3s. And it depends. There are many different reasons depending on why people may choose not to consume these types of products, but people who are on vegan or vegetarian or plant-based diets, people with fish allergies, or any kind of seafood allergy may not want to consume them. Some people just cannot tolerate a fish oil supplement. They just don't like them. And while that group is pretty small, especially if you get something high quality, they should be pretty tolerable. But for some folks, they just can't do it. So what are some alternatives? So I'm going to go over kind of a couple popular alternatives, and then we'll talk about some, things that are talked about as alternatives but may not be the best option. So the first one here, and probably our best and most popular plant-based omega-3 supplement, is algal-based supplements. These are algae. And they are made from seaweed. So seaweed is classified as a marine algae because it has no true stems, roots, or leaves, which is kind of a fun fact. But it's kind of just going down the chain. So it is the primary food source for many fish, including many fish high in omega-3. So you're just eating what the food the fish eat to get to be high in omega-3s. Seaweed grows quickly. It's easy to harvest and is abundant. It's a pretty good for the environment way of sourcing EPA and DHA. And algal supplements are excellent sources of EPA and DHA. They do tend to be lower concentrations than fish oil. And again, you think about just kind of biologically, the seaweed has a decent concentration of fish oil, but when the fish eat the seaweed, they tend to concentrate and hold on to, over time, a lot of EPA and DHA. So they concentrate it a lot more in their fatty tissue versus algae. So if you look at this supplement fact, this is from a pretty decent omega-3 algal supplement, and you can see there that the total EPA and DHA dose 195 plus 390. So it's pretty good, that total omega-3s, but it's not quite as good as like that first one I showed with the supplement facts from a fish oil supplement. It's not quite as high. And that's typically what we tend to see, is that algal supplements just don't have quite as much, but they are still really good quality. You're still getting EPA and DHA. And what you can do is you can just dose up. So if you are someone who needs double or triple what that supplement is offering, you just take 2 or 3 doses a day if that's the option that you need to go for, versus, taking the low dose and kind of sticking there. Algal-based supplements can be found as oil. They can be found as powder or dried sheets. So I didn't go over that in my source or my forms page, just because it's pretty much the only one that comes that way in dried sheets. But any 3 of these ways are valid ways to take it. Typically, the powder and dried sheets are going to have lower dosages than something like the oil or the capsules like soft gels. So those will tend to have higher concentrations, higher doses. So algal-based supplements are excellent for anybody who has a fish allergy. They're excellent for anyone that is on a plant-based supplement or plant-based diet. They are a great alternative for those folks. Okay, so we recommend this a lot for our vegans and vegetarians. Just have to be paying attention to that dosing and whether or not you need to dose up, dose down, that kind of thing. Adjust for your needs based on your omega-3 index. So this next one, many of you may not have heard of. It's, I would say, relatively new-ish as far as like, kind of being out in the marketplace. But this is called ahi flower, and it is a native plant to Europe and Asia that has kind of been bred to have seeds that are really high in amounts of omega-3. The primary omega-3 in ahi flower is ALA. So it's important to just remember that it is primarily ALA in it, but so it doesn't have any EPA and DHA in it. However, it does have something called SDA, which is stearidonic acid. And this is kind of an interesting fatty acid in that it's essentially a middle metabolite in the pathway from the conversion of ALA to EPA. It's in the middle. It skips a very important conversion, and it meaning that SDA can be converted to EPA a lot more efficiently than ALA itself can. So remember I said ALA has like that conversion rate somewhere in that like 4 to 8%, somewhere around there. SDA can be converted somewhere closer to 40% and possibly even more. So that means that although there's no EPA and DHA in ahi flower, it does have this stearidonic acid, which can raise that plasma EPA level pretty significantly without having to consume EPA and DHA. And this is really important because, if you are a vegan or a vegetarian, aside from the algal supplements we just talked about, it's really tough to get any other significant sources of EPA or DHA. And this, would be possibly a source to increase your EPA levels. There is research showing that there's significant anti-inflammatory effects from consuming ahi flower. The tricky part is that because it only improves EPA levels, it doesn't increase the omega-3 index nearly as much because it doesn't have it has a limited effect on DHA, if any effect on DHA at all. So it does raise EPA levels and can have a moderate to minor effect on the omega-3 index. But because it does not have that DHA effect, then it may not show up on that test at all. So it's a potentially sustainable omega-3 option to raise EPA levels because it is sustainably produced. But the omega-3 index just may not be accurate in reflecting its effects. So if you're taking something like ahi flower and you're not seeing your omega-3 index move, it doesn't necessarily mean it's not doing anything or it's not raising your EPA levels. It just may not be reflected on that test. So, we take that, kind of with a grain of salt and understanding that this may be a viable option for people who are vegans, vegetarians, those with the allergy or aversion or concerned about sustainability. A lot of similar people who may be taking an algal supplement. This is just another option in that kind of capacity. Although, again, it's important to note that it does not have that DHA effect, and DHA is really important, especially for a lot of the cognitive, stuff that we're talking about. So, ahi flour has potential, definitely an option, but just being aware of some of the limitations of surrounding it. Krill oil. So this is another option very commonly used is krill oil. It is a fantastic source of EPA and DHA, but it is not plant-based. A lot of people mistakenly believe that krill oil is plant-based or is a plant-based or vegetarian option for alternative for fish oil. It is not. Krill are little shrimp-like creatures that look just like that's a krill. They are shellfish as well too, so they may be extra kind of concerning for anybody with an allergy. The dosages with krill oil do tend to be a little bit lower, and you may need to take more with krill oil. So krill oil is great. It does have EPA and DHA in it, but again, the dosages tend to be a little bit lower. And as far as being an alternative to fish oil, I wouldn't particularly recommend it over fish oil just simply because it is a shellfish and the dosages do tend to be lower. But some people prefer it for whatever personal reasons, and that is perfectly fine. But it is not plant-based. So the next source that often gets touted as an alternative source of omega-3s, a dietary source, is grass-fed meat and dairy products. You'll see this in a lot of advertising, and I want to talk a little bit about this because I think it's really important to understand the differences here. So what is grass-fed and what is conventionally fed meat and dairy? I think that's an important place to start. Grass-fed is really that term grass-fed is intended to mean grass or pasture-fed for the entire lifespan of the cattle. However, the USDA definition of grass-fed is at least 50% grass-fed throughout the lifetime. So you could have an animal that is grass-fed for the first half of its life and then grain-fed or finished in feedlot for the last half of its life, and it's still considered grass-fed by the USDA definition. And this is why it's really important to understand some of these labels that come on some of these types of foods. These health labels don't necessarily mean what you think they mean. Conventionally or grain-fed meat, there's really no standard definition for that because it's basically anything that doesn't meet that USDA definition of grass-fed. Typically, this is not the case for every operation. So it varies pretty widely depending on, the size of the operation, things like that. But typically cattle are pasture or mixed fed until about 18 months. So they'll be in pasture feeding, which is grass, but they'll be mixed fed too. So they may get fed a diet with some extra supplementation as well as pasture grazing. And then they are finished in the conventional feedlots that we kind of think of when we envision kind of conventional cattle production or beef production in a feedlot with grain and other foodstuff to increase their weight before slaughter. So that's the difference. And if you're saying to yourself, wait a minute, that doesn't seem like a huge difference, it's because it's not. That's why the grass-fed label, sure, there are farms out there that are grass and pasture fed for the entirety of their lifetime. But that is not every grass-fed operation. Grass-fed meat and dairy do have more omega-3s than grain-fed. So I do want to make sure that, I'm not saying that they don't, but the doses are so extremely low compared to marine sources that they basically are non-existent. So this is an example. This was pulled from a paper in Food Science and Animal Resources from 2022 comparing grain-fed beef and grass-fed beef. And they found on average, the grain-fed beef had about 23.11 milligrams per 100 grams of omega-3s. So EPA and DHA combined, they had about 23.11 milligrams. Grass-fed beef combined had 36.04 milligrams per 100 grams. So it does have more. There is more. It's almost 50% more, okay? But when we're talking about kind of the average person needing to get around 1,000 milligrams, potentially more, up to 1,500 milligrams of omega-3s per day, that's nothing. Farmed Atlantic salmon, so not even wild caught, farmed Atlantic salmon has 1,966 milligrams per 100 grams. So the difference here is just orders of magnitude. It is not necessarily incorrect to say grass-fed beef has more than grain-fed beef, but farmed Atlantic salmon, or just as an example here, salmon has so much significantly more than either one of those that it is very misleading to call either one of the beef sources an actual source of omega-3s at all. This is just an example. This was a farm that was kind of trying to use this as an example of their omega-6 to 3 ratios in selling their beef. And yes, the omega-6 to 3 ratio is lower in grass-fed beef. And this is something that a lot of these companies will use as advertising. They'll say, well, ours has a better omega-6 to 3 ratio. And that is true. But again, the dosages are so incredibly low that it's effectively means nothing. Also, primarily the omega-3 that you're finding in here, even with some amount of omega-3s, is primarily ALA, with very low EPA and DHA in that other category. So in truth, and that's not the whole other category, it's just like a very slow. There's probably no DHA, maybe some EPA, but for the most part, it's all ALA. So if you are spending double the amount of money to get grass-fed beef because you think it is a high quality, another source of omega-3s, I would highly encourage you to save that money, buy conventional beef, and then eat salmon a couple times a week, or put that money towards a higher quality fish oil supplement. You'll just get way more bang for your buck. There are some other arguments regarding grass-fed beef, ethics, animal, care, things like that I'm not going to go into. But if strictly looking for it from an omega-3 perspective, save your money. I did put this quote in here just because this is from the South Dakota State University Extension. I thought it was very, very pertinent. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but therefore, other terminology tends to creep into the understanding of expectations of grass-fed/grass finished. Many consumers who purchase grass-fed beef would not purchase grain-fed beef, so without this option, the beef industry would lose the market share to other competing proteins. The reason I felt to put this in there is exactly what I just said. If you are spending double your amount of money to get grass-fed beef, when instead you could purchase salmon, and you're doing so because you think grass-fed beef has higher, nutrients, especially omega-3s, you would be much, much better off purchasing the salmon instead, right? Much better off. And that it's just a little kind of trickery that the beef industry, they want to sell you more beef. So they're kind of coming up with this, it's a healthier kind. So again, not saying beef is unhealthy or that you shouldn't eat beef at all. That is not my message here in any way, shape, or form. My message is that don't spend your money on the extra grass-fed beef if this is your primary concern. Save that money and buy fish or a good supplement. All right, another alternative source of omega-3 that is often discussed are chia seeds. And chia seeds are great. They are highly nutritious, high in fiber, minerals, calcium, magnesium, iron, selenium, copper, phosphorus. You can put them in all sorts of foods, drinks, all that kind of stuff, and they are high in omega-3s, but just not EPA and DHA. They are very similar to other nuts and seeds, and they contain ALA, but no EPA or DHA. I want to reiterate, I'll say this several times while I talk about the next few sources, that you should eat chia seeds. They are very healthy for you. They are highly nutritious. ALA is good for you, but they just won't increase your EPA and DHA and be reflected on the omega-3 index. Again, they have tons of health benefits, just not raising your omega-3 index. Flaxseed, pretty much same story as chia seeds. very highly nutritious, lots of fiber, all sorts of other minerals in there as well. Same thing, high in ALA, just not EPA and DHA. And so good to include in your diet, just not going to impact your omega-3 index at all. Walnuts, same story as the last two. A lot of people will say, oh, yes, eat your nuts and seeds. Make sure you get walnuts to increase your omega-3s. You see seed mixes like this that are like mega omega. And again, it's not wrong. There are omega-3s in there. Walnuts are an incredibly good source of, ALA. They have about 2,500 milligrams of ALA per serving. So walnuts are amazing. And cashews, macadamia, pecans, and pistachios are much lower in dosage, but walnuts like stand out as how much ALA they have. And they again have tons of fiber, magnesium, copper, vitamin E. Fiber is so good for you. But they just don't contain any EPA or DHA. So when it comes to increasing your omega-3 index, these just aren't going to do it. Now, if you're eating a lot of walnuts with that conversion of ALA, you may be able to budge your EPA a little bit, but not nearly as much as you would if you're consuming marine sources. Fortified foods, these kind of go along with the ready-to drinks I was talking about. Fortified foods often are just fortified with small amounts of omega-3s, and it's almost always ALA. One of the most kind of well-known popular versions of this is Eggland's Best Eggs. They do have higher amounts of omega-3s. They do have less saturated fat than regular eggs, and they are fortified. Their feed is added. The omega-3s are added to the chicken feed, and they do have higher amounts of other vitamins, but it's only 125 grams of omega-3. And through all my research, I could not find what kind of omega-3 it was, but it's pretty safe to assume, especially in this situation, that it is ALA because of what chickens eat, because they're vegetarian fed hens. So if it's coming from a plant source, it's ALA. So again, perfectly fine if you want to buy Eggland's Best Eggs, but they are more expensive than regular eggs. And if you're doing it for the omega-3s, save your money, buy the cheaper eggs. Or get some from a local farmer if you can, because those tend to have a lot of nutrients as well. And save your money, buy the cheaper eggs, and save that up and buy some salmon a couple of times a week, or put that money towards a higher quality supplement. A lot of these labels end up kind of convincing us that we're getting, if we eat enough of this, we'll get enough omega-3s throughout the week, but the doses are often too low, and it's often the wrong omega-3. The last thing I'm really going to touch on here is canola and camelina oils. So again, canola oil is kind of a similar story to some of those plant-based, flaxseed and things like that, in that it does have ALA, but no EPA or DHA. Same thing with camelina oil, which is also known as false flax oil. It's popular for horses and is an omega-3 supplement, and it's not really any more advantageous than other oils. Canola oil, same thing. It's got a lot of ALA in it. If you look at the ALA amount here on this particular chart, the orange is ALA. Canola oil has got a pretty good amount. Flaxseed oil, though most people aren't cooking with flaxseed oil, has a lot. So canola oil compared to, let's say, olive oil, has a lot of ALA, but it's ALA. So again, it's pretty easy to get ALA in your diet if you are eating, kind of these different products. If you eat nuts, if you eat seeds, those kind of things, you can get ALA pretty easy here. It's very difficult to get enough EPA and DHA in your diet unless you are making concerted effort to eat fish, high amount EPA and DHA fish several times per week. So the bottom line here is that marine sources, pretty straightforward, are the best sources of EPA and DHA. Algal supplements, fish oil, krill oil to some extent, cod liver oil, those are just going to be your best options for getting EPA and DHA. Algal supplements, really, I would maybe put ahi flour here because of its effect on EPA, but it does not have that DHA effect. So algal supplements are really the only plant-based source of significant amounts of both EPA and DHA. So if you are looking for something that is vegetarian, vegan, algal products are going to be the way to go. There's a variety of brands, there's a variety of qualities out there. So just important to, take your time and look depending on the dosage that you need. I just want to reiterate one more time that all of these foods here that I talked about, flax, chia seeds, fortified foods, beef, all of those things, they're really highly nutritious. They're good for you. They provide a lot, like beef high in iron, there's all the flax and chia seeds, things like that. Those are really high in fiber and we need those in our diet. They're just simply not good sources of EPA and DHA and will not impact omega-3 index level. But that doesn't mean that they don't have a place in a nutritious, kind of well-balanced diet. So I just want to make that very, very clear to anyone who's seeing this and saying, oh no, I'm putting like flax seeds in my, my oatmeal in the morning. Should I not do that anymore? That is a perfectly fine thing to do, and you should do it for a lot of reasons. Just getting omega-3s, especially EPA and DHA, isn't going to be one of those reasons, and you need to look at that, from another angle. All right, and then we're going to go ahead and move on to the Q&A. Thank you so much.